Good morning, my friends. This is the Grimflayer, and I hope you are all doing well, despite the fact, or perhaps because of the fact, that KCI has been banned. That's right. krark-clan Ironworks is no longer with us. Everybody's favorite deck, right? Everybody's favorite deck to face. You know, nothing better than sitting there watching your opponent, stumble through the not quite infinite loop yet, so you can't really concede because they could fizzle. Nothing better than watching it on stream, right? And of course, the most intuitive deck in Modern. Oh boy, all these superlatives and more, of course they apply to KCI. Everybody's favorite deck. It is no longer with us, though. KCI has been banned. There was some speculation that Wizards might take the path of least resistance, with no bans whatsoever. There was other speculation that they might seek to instead ban a component piece, like Scrap Trawler. Neither of these have been the case. Wizards has gone straight for the throat and has banned the namesake card of Modern's best deck. So, what does this mean? What is their rationale? Let's find out. By the way, no other bans. No other bans, no other unbans. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's see what Wizards has to say. So, R&D has continued to monitor the evolution and health of the format for the last year. KCI has risen to the top with, and they go through a few of the stats here, and the stats really are fairly damning for KCI. 4 copies in the most recent GP top 8. It is an outlier, it is only one event, but my goodness, is that a significant number anyway. It's a significant result. On top of that, you have the really high day 2 percentages that KCI has put up. You have pro players like Matt Nass with disgusting, 80+% win rates against other very competitive players. And of course, on top of that, you have the anecdotal evidence, perhaps, but the evidence nonetheless of Matt Nass himself saying that KCI should be banned. And I believe he said that KCI itself was his preferred ban, not a component piece from the deck. So anyway, Wizards gets into that, how no other deck is really, competing with KCI on the GP level. Now, I have seen some people say, well, how can you ban a deck? It's only 5% of the meta. But, this refers to the online meta, which, number one, we don't have exact data for anyway. In fact, our data is reasons to believe it's very flawed. Number two, whatever the real number is, it's artificially low, right? Because it is miserable to click through all of the actions, all the game actions you need to take on MTGO just to execute your combo with KCI. And personally, if I'm in a league, I'm making my opponent play it out. It's nothing personal, but like you choosing to bring this deck, the clock is potentially going to be relevant. If there's money on the line, I'm sorry, I'm going to make you click through it, most times anyway. So imagine doing that all the time, every time. It's just not any fun. So we've got that factor artificially keeping the numbers of KCI down. So Wizards didn't really get into that here, but that's the answer to why a deck with such a quote-unquote low meta share was on the chopping block for bans, right? So anyway, they go on to say this was not a clear-cut decision. They went into the data. Requires detailed rules knowledge and careful practice to master. So obviously there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but we've got some really, really unusual rules that even very experienced pros, the first time they played or saw KCI, they're like, I don't really get it. It's very, very unintuitive. So, Wizards has concluded that Ironworks poses a long-term threat to the health of competitive Modern play. And I think this is correct. People have been making the argument for banning Ancient Stirrings, which I am receptive to, that it's kind of future-proofing the format in a way. It's kind of saying, look, Ancient Stirrings, is a bit of a problem now, and it's only a matter of time before it just keeps becoming more and more of a problem, kind of by definition. I think there's some merit to that for Stirrings, but I think that also applies to KCI just about as well. So this is a bit of future-proofing, you know. Ironworks does pose a long-term threat to the health of the format, in my opinion. And it's one of those decks that the longer it stuck around, the more and more people would just, like, finally take the plunge. Like, if it's clearly the best deck in Modern, despite the fact that it might not be everyone's favorite playstyle, despite the annoyance of playing it on MTGO, more and more people will finally bite the bullet and say, you know what, I really should just be playing KCI, so I'm going to finally take the plunge. So I think it was inevitable. I agree with Wizards here. You know, high GP top 8 conversion rate, highly polarized game 1 win rate, sometimes long turn length, and difficult rules interactions as secondary factors. These are all things that I covered yesterday in my response video to Nikachu, and I, of course, agree with Wizards here that all of that is true. So they go into a little bit of a, little bit of a further explanation to all that stuff, but we've already covered that on this channel. And, you know, they make their caveat, they make their disclaimer. We're all about the strategic depth and robust rule system and high skill decks and all that stuff. So this is not to say that you can't have your rules lawyering in the game or anything, or your high skill cap deck in the game or anything. It's just that KCI is a bit of an outlier in too many ways. That's basically how you could sum it up. Win rate, rules interactions, or perhaps rules abuse, depending on your perspective. Enjoyability of play, ease of understanding, all this stuff put together. It's just an outlier on too many fronts, right? So here's where it gets really interesting, though, guys. We considered 3 possible cards to ban: Stirring's Opal and KCI itself. Now, they went on to, of course, decide on KCI, but let's read a little bit more about this. We have Ancient Stirrings and Mox Opal, representing 2 categories of cards that R&D keeps a careful eye on: card selection and fast mana. Stirrings brings deck building restrictions. Okay, so before we get in actually to the specifics here, let's just take a moment to note how unusual it is for Wizards to go this deep into explanations about changes that they didn't make. Now, some people have criticized Wizards very stridently in the past. You know, while they're just making an announcement, no changes, and they don't give us any explanation, this is very unsatisfying. And I agree with those people that on the face of it, yeah, that's very unsatisfying. People speculate, you know, on the ban list ad infinitum. It's generated hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of posts over the course of time, and many videos and many face-to-face discussions, and then they just come out and say, yep, no changes, see you next time. You know, I get how unsatisfying that is, but here's the flip side, right? Because people discuss ban list changes and unban, you know, prospective unbans so much, Wizards is kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. Because if they don't give you any explanation for the changes they didn't make, then people are unsatisfied. But if they do give you the explanations, then people are going to read so much into them that Wizards almost becomes bound by their own speculation or their own explanations, right? Because people are going to read the tea leaves, you know, as much as humanly possible about this specific explanation and about other explanations that they might have done in the past and chose not to. And I think that's why. I think because, you know, again, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. If Wizards says they're speculating about future Stirrings and Opal bans, and then next time they ban Faithless Looting, well, you know, people are going to pull this back up and say, well, this was misleading, or, you know, what have you. It's just I just want to point out that it is a tightrope for Wizards to walk. It's not an enviable position, let's put it that way. So, but that said, they did choose to give us an explanation here, and of course we're going to dissect it a bit. So, like I said, one factor that we consider is that Stirrings brings deck building restrictions. Now, this is probably the only thing I don't really agree with. Like, technically, yes, this is correct. In practice, not so much. It's not like somebody says, boy oh boy, I want to build a deck around Ancient Stirrings, but, ooh, I'm restricted to only colorless cards for the most part, and maybe some green ones that I don't mind whiffing on with Stirrings. It's the opposite. These colorless heavy decks like Tron, like Hardened Scales Affinity, like the late great KCI, and like Amulet Titan to a lesser degree. It's not so much colorless, but it does thrive on stirrings because it can fetch the namesake card and it can fetch the right land. These are all strategies that, the strategy is the point of the deck. The strategy is the build around, and stirrings is an enabler for the deck. Stirrings is not the build around, not even close. So when you say that Ancient Stirrings brings deck building restrictions, it is true in a technical sense, but not really in a practical sense. In other words, imagine a corollary card where you could, for 1 blue mana, dig 5 cards deep and take a blue card or a land into your hand. Yes, that would also come with a deck building restriction of being heavily in blue, but again, to say that it's got some deck building restrictions, it's not. It just doesn't really ring true. It doesn't really ring true, and even if it is true, the restriction is not an impediment to the power of these decks. All of these decks that we just mentioned are tier 1 or thereabouts in their very powerful strategies, and they're in many ways the most powerful thing you can be doing in each individual archetype, right? Tron is the most powerful big mana deck, potentially having some competition from Titan Shift, but otherwise it's pretty much the king of big mana. KCI was the king of combo. Amulet Titan exists in kind of a weird space where it's kind of hybrid combo big mana, so I don't quite know how to classify that, but it's got a huge meta share. It's a powerful deck. And then Hardened Scales is kind of the best robots deck. It's the new affinity, right? So to say that the Ancient Stirrings brings deck building restrictions, I don't quite buy that. But moving on, when we examine the effect of powerful cards, we consider whether they're increasing or decreasing the number of viable decks in the environment. Yes, of course, fair enough. The build-around nature of Stirring supports decks that look very different from a simple collection of the strongest rate cards and that otherwise may not exist. Again, Stirrings is not the build-around, right? The overarching strategy is the build-around, and Stirrings is the enabler for that strategy to be very, very, very consistent. These strategies, like I went into in my video yesterday, could all still exist quite viably if Ancient Stirrings were banned. Mox Opal is a similar case. In addition to showing up in high-profile decks like Scales, we see it enabling a variety of more fringe artifact synergy decks as a category. We think they are generally healthy, provided they appear in small doses and have reasonable win rates. As busted as Mox Opal is, and as much as I do accept Nikachu's argument from yesterday about how Opal escapes consideration in discussions to a very bizarre degree, it should be under a lot more scrutiny than it is by the broader community, I still think this statement from Wizards holds true. I still have no issue with that. And as Modern stands, our metagame data does not indicate a need to impact Stirrings or Opal decks. Fair enough. They have access to better data than any of us do. We're kind of cobbling together results and speculating from there. We don't have perfect data to work with, so, you kind of have to take their word for it there. Bear in mind, this is based on the current state of the metagame. Stirrings and Opal are not being given a free pass in perpetuity. Okay, so this is where the tea leaf reading comes in. Are we going to have people panicking about a Stirrings or an Opal ban over the next year? How does this ripple effect affect people's view of the format? We'll have to see. But this is where Wizards, I'm grateful that they gave the explanation. And right now, what I'm reading on discussions is that people are pumped about this. They're like, hey, Wizards gave us a nice thorough explanation. Whether or not I love the ban and unban decisions, at least they gave us the explanation. But we'll see whether this comes back to bite Wizards. I have a feeling it might, at least to some degree. While we have no current plans to take action against these two cards, we'll continue to monitor the health of the environment, the strength of the decks that use them. We'll revisit this discussion if need be, basically, and at this time we're choosing the surgical ban against KCI itself and avoiding splash damage against other archetypes. So fair enough, there you have it, and that's where it ends. The rest is Pauper. So KCI. KCI, we hardly knew ye. He's gone but not forgotten. R.I.P. All that stuff. No more KCI. No more KCI. So I'm totally fine with this. I really think the deck needed some kind of ban, and frankly, I would have been fine with either this ban, or an Ancient Stirrings ban, or a Scrap Trawler ban. I probably would have accepted any of the three. Now, I want to pop back over here quick. It is worth noting, since we're reading the tea leaves here, like I said, people are going to read a lot into what is here and what is not here. No mention whatsoever of Faithless Looting. No mention whatsoever of Faithless Looting, and if you watched my video yesterday, I agreed with Nikachu that Faithless Looting is also something that should be on Wizards' watch list, and almost certainly is, but the fact that they didn't mention anything, that's very, very interesting. So I don't quite know what to make of that, and maybe we're going to see Looting supplant Stirrings as the new kind of enabler card that people are talking about over the next several months. Now that KCI has been banned, we'll have to see. But yeah, KCI is gone. KCI is out. Of course, people are going to try to make this Eggs-style deck work without KCI. I'm sure there's ways to do it. I'm sure it's not going to be as good. But we'll have to see. There's a lot of really powerful components to that strategy. People aren't going to want to just leave that playstyle by the wayside, I don't think. So we'll have to see what crops up in its wake, what imitators rise to the challenge, and whether they're any good. So next is the very sad news that there are no unbans now. Stoneforge Mystic, man, it's a good thing she's into meditation and yoga, as you can tell from the art here, because she's just got nothing to do. She's just in ban jail, doing absolutely nothing with her life. Yeah, she gets out to play Legacy a little bit here and there, and maybe some Commander, but she really wants to take the field in Modern. She really, really wants to take the field in Modern, and we're not gonna get her yet. I don't know why. Again, if we want to read the tea leaves, let's pop back over here quick. When they were mentioning the very strong finishes of KCI, in fact, only one other archetype, they say, Blue-White Control, has posted more than half as many top 8 finishes as Ironworks in those events. So perhaps, just perhaps, the heavy presence at the GP level of Blue-White Control decks is making them a little bit hesitant to unleash Stoneforge Mystic. Now, in my video yesterday, I mentioned how I do not think she's any good, except maybe as a sideboard card. Even then, I'm not really that convinced. In the current clear top dog of the UWX control decks, which is the Blue-White Miracles build. She's a non-bow there. She's not good. She's not worth the slots that she and the equipment would need. Non-bow with Terminus, no way. So I think that's a bit of an unfounded fear, but at the same time, maybe they have obliquely hinted that they think the current relative power of control in Modern, adding Stoneforge Mystic to the mix, is a bit risky. But if that is indeed their reasoning, I don't really buy it, because control as an archetype is not very good in Modern at all. It's basically the Blue-White Miracles deck, and then to a much lesser extent the Jeskai, both Jeskai variants, I guess, Miracles, and the more lower curve 1-for-1, 2-for-1 Jeskai deck. Both of which have fallen off pretty mightily from their position half a year ago. Both Jeskai versions, that is. Blue-White Control is still doing well, but again, that's the one control deck that clearly doesn't want Stoneforge Mystic, in my opinion. So, anyway, yeah, I'm disappointed, to be honest. I'm disappointed that I won't be able to play a little Absent Stoneblade for you on the channel. I love this card. I really wish it was banned. I think it'd be unbanned, rather. I think it'd be totally fine. But it's not to be. We'll have to. The speculators will all have to hang on to their copies a little while longer, and we'll all have to wait a little bit longer to see her in action. So, what does the KCI ban mean for our beloved Green-Black Rock, our beloved Tarmogoyf deck? Well, we were one of the few decks, perhaps, that interact enough to really take KCI down consistently. Like a lot of decks in Modern don't interact that much, and they have a little bit of token interaction, and then maybe a little bit more interaction from the side. But KCI is so consistent and so resilient to disruption that, like, the moderate levels of interaction that those other decks have post-side, it's not usually enough to fight through a good KCI start, but the density of our interaction is so high, and the variety. We have removal spells for the creature enablers when the windows for that are good. We have, of course, hand disruption is great, and of course we have all of the destruction for non-creature permanents like Trophy, Decay, and Pulse. We have Liliana. The Veil, of course, is always nice against just about any combo deck, right? So we were one of the few decks that interacted profitably against KCI due to the variety of our interaction and the density of it. We also, with our good friend Tarmogoyf pictured here, can put on a decent clock, right? So, purely on a one-for-one basis, we're a deck that didn't really fear KCI. So, just on a surface-level analysis, it's kind of bad for us that it's left the meta. But if KCI was warping the meta toward extremes, right? Because, like I said, most other decks cannot interact that well with KCI, so a lot of people were saying, well, if KCI is the deck to beat, maybe I just have to race it. Maybe I'm going to play Dredge, or maybe, you know, forgive me if I give bad examples here, because I don't know what KCI's, you know, matchup hierarchy is or anything, but, you know, you understand my point. You know, Dredge, Infect, Burn, Storm, you know, decks that can... Arclight Phoenix, maybe, decks that can realistically just race KCI. You know, maybe they interact a time or two along the way, but they're really just trying to race and win that way. So, of course, it's no secret that fair, interactive mid-range decks are spread a little bit too thin in Modern. You see the kind of the middling success of Jund, the complete fallout of Mardu Pyromancer, the complete non-existence of, like, you know, Bant in Naya mid-range strategies, stuff like that, of Orzhov mid-range Dead Gael. None of that stuff really exists in Modern. I continue to believe that Golgari, straight green Blackrock, is the best mid-range deck in Modern. That said, it is no secret that mid-range strategies are spread a little bit too thin, and maybe KCI was fueling that. Even if KCI is a decent matchup, you know, if KCI was indeed compelling people to play other linear decks at all ends of the spectrum, all the ones I just listed and then some, yeah, you know, we are spread a little bit too thin. Maybe the meta consolidates a little bit more toward interaction in the wake of KCI leaving the meta. We will have to see, so it's really hard to say. If you're somebody who plays a lot online, again, KCI was not that well represented relative to its power level, so you know, you won't be seeing it anymore, obviously, but that might not change all that much in your local meta. Who knows? If you've got a lot of KCI in your local meta, well, my advice to you would be two things. Number one, expect those players to jump to Hardened Scales or another Mox Opal deck, just financially. That is probably their best bet. You might also see them if they really, you know, obviously they could do anything, but don't be surprised to see an uptick in Mox Opal and other Mox Opal decks in the wake of this if you had a strong KCI presence at your local store. The other thing is if you suspect that to be the case, don't take away your anti-artifact technology, whatever it might be, even if it's just a high density of catch-all spells like, you know, Maelstrom Pulse, a second Maelstrom Pulse in your sideboard, things like this. I wouldn't move away from that just because KCI got banned, again, because people are probably going to stay on the artifact train one way or another, on average, if for no other reason than purely for financial reasons. So that's just my quick advice, but of course, you know, take it or leave it based on how your local meta looks. And anyway, I just wanted to, because a couple people asked me to do this, to make a video on the BNR announcement, I just wanted to do that, and that's about all we've got to say, so I'll leave it there. As always, everybody, let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching. I might be playing a few games later on today, I don't know. I would really like to, because I might have a really busy week coming up at work. Might struggle to get some new videos made for several days, but we'll have to see how the day goes. So regardless, stay tuned to the channel. Please continue supporting the channel in whatever way you see fit. I've got Patreon, link is in the description below. Otherwise, we can like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. You guys know what to do. So let me know what you think about the BNR announcement. Let me know what you think about my analysis of it. And yeah, I'll see you in the comment section. So thanks again for tuning in, and I will talk to you soon. I hope you have a great day.